Our ancient connections may not be obvious to this group. Our ancestors adapted to different climates, and as a result, humans are now among the most physically varied-looking species on the planet. But looks can be deceiving.
We're basically identical at the genetic level. I mean, if you look at the average person's DNA sequence and compare the same region to another person they're unrelated to, you know, they're 99.9% identical.
All that? There. Look right here. This is great.
Light, dark, big, small, curly, straight, brown, blue. Minuscule genetic changes account for all of our differences. To track our ancient paths, though, scientists study DNA that stays very much the same. In men like George Dellis, it's a Y chromosome.
All that? Let's do one more.
It's been passed down the line from father to son over thousands of generations, and ultimately traces back to one man who lived in Africa around 60,000 years ago. Call him Scientific Adam. He wasn't the only guy alive back then, but only his Y chromosome survived through the ages, and every man alive today has a copy.
Yep, up and down, really push it in there.
For women like Nejla Demirci, the DNA comes from special cell structures called mitochondria, which both men and women carry, but only moms pass along. These trace back to one woman who also lived in Africa between 150 to 200,000 years ago. Call her Scientific Eve. She is the oldest root of our family tree. Africa is where the journey begins for everyone alive today.
Forensic artist Richard Neve has helped the police solve murder cases by reconstructing faces from skulls. In the hope of discovering more about the first Europeans, we've asked him to reconstruct the face of the Wassa skull.
So this is Wassa?
This is Wassa. There we are.
It's wonderful to see him or her. We're not quite sure, are we?
No.
Fleshed
no.
out.
Touch androgynous, maybe, this one.
It's quite strange, actually, because this doesn't particularly look like a European.
The Brazilian finds show that the New World was discovered tens of thousands of years earlier than previously believed, and certainly well before the time of the American Indians. But who then were these pioneers? A much earlier wave of Mongoloids? Or another race altogether? Clues to the identity of the first Americans are emerging in rock shelters in the northeast and southeast of Brazil. Archaeologists have recently unearthed human remains. Prehistoric skulls were found buried in layers of soil, 9 to 12,000 years old. They are the oldest skulls in the Americas. And this is the oldest of them all. The skull of a young woman, nicknamed Luthia by scientists. Can she tell us who the first Americans were? Walter Neves is a physical anthropologist at Sao Paulo University in Brazil. He has been using a standard and reliable archaeological measure, the shape of the skull, to find out what race she belonged to.
91.
He fully expected Luthia to be a Mongoloid, an ancestor of the American Indians.
91.
But then he fed the measurements into the computer.
When we started running the computer and seeing the results, it was amazing because we realized that the statistics, the quantitative analysis we were doing was not showing these people to be Mongoloid. In fact, the analysis was showing these people was anything except Mongoloid.
Who then was Luthia? And where did she come from? To find out, the skull was taken to a hospital in Rio de Janeiro to begin the process of reconstructing her face. The first stage was to perform a three-dimensional CAT scan of Luthia's skull in order to build a replica. The cast was then given to Richard Neve of the University of Manchester and one of the world's leading forensic artists to recreate her features.
That, to me, is a Negroid face that has all the features you associate with a Negroid face. The proportions of the face, it doesn't say anything about it being Mongoloid.
However, there is something that could settle this debate of where the Chinese come from once and for all.
After that,
I'm meeting Professor Jin Li, one of China's leading geneticists. Recently, he led a project that set out to prove that the Chinese evolved independently from everyone else, from Homo erectus, here in China.
before the project started, I was hoping that I could identify or could be able to find evidence that support independent origin of Chinese in China, because I'm a Chinese and came from China, and through the education process, I always believed that there's something special about Chinese.
He singled out a male genetic marker which only appeared about 80,000 years ago in Africa. So any man who carries that marker must have recent African ancestors and can't be descended from the more ancient Asian Homo erectus. Jin took DNA from over 160 ethnic groups around East Asia. Over 12,000 samples. And so, what did you find?
We did not see any, even one single individual that could be considered as the descendant of the Homo erectus in China. Rather, everybody was a descendant of our ancestors from Africa.
The result couldn't have been any clearer. And how did that make you feel as a Chinese person?
After I saw the evidences that we generate in my laboratory, I think we should all be happy with that, because after all, modern humans from different part of the world are not so different from each other, and we are very close relatives.
It's great, thank you.